Om Shanti. I'm going to talk a little bit about the fifth movement of the spine, axial extension. So axial extension is our ability to basically straighten out the spine. We have natural curvature through the spine. The lumbar spine arches slightly forward, while the thoracic arches back, and then the cervical comes forward. So if we look at that in the spine a little bit, we have the lumbar spine arching a bit this direction, whereas the thoracic arches a bit through this direction, and cervical through this direction. So our ability for axial extension comes from lengthening a bit, basically taking the vertebra so they're not smushed up against each other and separating them slightly. So this does take some of that curvature out of the spine, but that's not necessarily the goal of axial extension. We want to be able to lengthen the spine a bit so that we keep a bit more structural integrity of the postures that we are building. This can be throughout our day. If we are sitting at a desk or even on the couch and we just notice this slumping that happens, we're letting go of that axial extension. If we bring ourselves into yoga postures and we're not extended enough, we're not going to be able to engage the core or build some of that elasticity of the posture. So again, the most important points, the reason why we use axial extension is to build elasticity in the structures that we are building, to strengthen the core so that we get core support during the postures, and so that we maintain structural integrity of the posture. The spine has all of these little muscles between each of the vertebrae that we want to use to help open the spine up. When we sink into things, we aren't actually training those muscles, and those are the muscles that help us stay upright, whether that's walking throughout the day, sitting at our desk, sitting for meditation, and we want to be able to strengthen them by lengthening the spine. So we're going to find that just in a few different postures today for you to explore it. We could go through almost every single yoga posture and find axial extension. But we're going to start on your back. This is probably one of the easier postures for us to find it in because naturally when we come onto our back, some of the curvature is going to go away as we come onto the spine. If we want to think a little bit more about that axial extension, we can bring the legs together, interlace the fingers, and reach the arms up overhead. Try to lengthen the spine. You might even need to adjust some of the upper back to try to open the spine up. Feel the low back press into the ground as you come into this position. And then relax the arms and legs, just kind of releasing through this extended position. Again, reach the arms up overhead. If you want to interlace the fingers, you can. You can reach toes and fingers away from each other, or heels and wrists. Feel the low back pressing into the ground and try to open up the spine as much as possible. And relax. So you can feel that decompression as you come back into a non-active axial extension. So you kind of just release the spine, everything can kind of sink back in and release. So it's going to be more noticeable as we come into a seated position. We'll have the legs straight out in front of us. If you have the toes flexed, that's fine. You can let them be relaxed. But I want you to just observe when you come into this position naturally, how does the spine feel? Are you lengthening, or are you kind of slumping, slouching a little bit here? And then with some intention, I want you to feel the tailbone press down and build the spine up. Try to open the vertebra as you lengthen through the top of the head. These are subtle movements, but you should feel a lot longer in the spine, and observe the arching in the lumbar spine, the thoracic, even through the cervical vertebra, and how as you come into this axial extension, the body becomes a bit more poised and ready for movement. You can see in this position here how we're prepared to come into a forward fold. We're not going to come into that today, but I just want you to observe this length. And this is a very beneficial posture to come into, this staff pose, as you just feel the tailbone pressing down and that axial extension up through the crown of the head. And as you sit in this posture a little bit longer, notice how the spine softens a little bit more. As you come into it, you're tensing those muscles to lift up the spine, but as you relax, the muscles become a bit more responsive, a bit more supple, but you're still able to keep the spine nice and elongated. And then next posture will be a bound ankle posture. So hands around the ankles. So here it's really easy to want to come into this slouched position. So I really want you to think about pressing that tailbone in, almost like you're drawing the chest forward. Sometimes this will feel like we're coming into back extension here as we're actually moving into axial extension. And the verbiage is similar intentionally because we are extending slightly, but we're opening up all those little joints between the vertebrae. Just feel the chest almost reaching forward and up as you lengthen the spine. Again, observe how this feels in the body after first coming in and really making things active, and then how can you soften the posture a little bit more. Sometimes this can be pretty challenging for us to hold as we are requiring all of those really small muscles along the vertebra to hold us up. And if we're not used to engaging those muscles, they're going to get tired very, very quickly. And we're going to try to shift the support from those deep muscles closest to the spine to the more superficial muscles closer to the skin. And those muscles closer to the skin are a lot larger, but that also means they get fatigued a lot quicker because they're not really meant for this movement. And we can relax that. So we're probably going to find this most importantly in a seated posture. So whether it's in that staff position or bound ankle, if you come into a cross-legged position, so for this I usually recommend heel in front of heel. Now, obviously, if you have tightness in the hips or knees, you're going to have this one knee lift up or even both knees, which is going to force you to round the spine more. So to avoid that, sometimes I'll recommend lifting the hips up, so bringing them onto a cushion. But even in the seated posture, whatever position you come into, as you come into a seated posture, I want you to just feel what happens through the spine. So we're not lifting the hips. If you're in this position, or even if you need to extend the leg out to bring yourself into something that's comfortable, you can technically do this with both legs extended. I just want you to feel how much axial extension you can get in the seated position. After experiencing that axial extension here, we're going to try this in a bit more active postures. So bring yourself into a plank position. So you can do this in a forearm plank with the legs extended, or in a high plank with the arms straight. Wherever you're going to experiment, feel from now we get to use the heels a bit, reaching through the top of the head. Now, in a plank position, we want to feel the pelvis pulling slightly towards the chin, but still lengthening the spine. Now, obviously, if we're engaging this, it's going to be a little bit tiresome to hold for too long. So we're going to try our next one, which will be a downward dog. So we can keep the knees a bit bent here, particularly if we're not warmed up through the hamstrings or calves. And you're pressing the hands in. Now, we don't want to slouch towards the ground. We really want to press the hips up and back, opening up the shoulders so that we can really lengthen the spine here. Take a few deep breaths. And then walk the feet all the way forward or halfway on the mat and walk the hands back as you come into a forward fold. So here, you can bend the knees if you want a little bit, or you can start to straighten them. The axial extension in a posture like this is really going to be about settling the spine. Here we use gravity to help bring us into that extension, helping to open up the vertebra. Sometimes I can really imagine that space expanding. I can even feel that space expanding as I let go of the tension from the tailbone through the crown of the head. And make your way into a standing posture in Tadasana. So our final position that we'll explore this in is our Tadasana, our home base for our standing movement, our sun salutations. So if we're standing a lot, we're going to start to feel that slumping down, the chest getting closer towards the knees, the butt kind of pressing back. Sometimes we'll come into a position more like this with the hips pressing back. Regardless of where we're at, we want to feel ourselves stack. So if I were to draw a straight line, I should be able to go through, starting at the heels, go through the knees, the hips, the shoulders, and the ear, a straight line all the way up. You can feel some axial extension, even if you don't know what this looks like perfectly. Feeling the lumbar spine open up, the thoracic, and then finally into the neck. Taking some deep breaths here. And notice when you come into the extension how the core tightens just a little bit to help you retain that position. And then what areas of the body can you start to relax a bit more? While holding that extension. And you can shake it out a little bit. Just letting go of that tension. And that's all for today. So I just want you to think about, as you begin to explore more yoga postures, how can you open up the spine as you come into different postures, whether that's in a forward fold, a backward bend, a spinal twist, or even a side bend. We can use this concept of axial extension to help us open up, expand, so to get really nice core strength. We can get some really nice integrity of our postures, and you'll feel that if you start to do this, you might actually lose some mobility on the front end as you explore, and then as you use it, you're going to gain a lot of mobility really quickly, regardless of what movement you're trying through the spine. So that's all for today. Om Shanti. May we be blessed with radiant joy, peace, prosperity, and abundant health. Om Shanti.